Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. We're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians 4
Oh, yeah.
and trying to understand, how this letter written almost 2,000 years ago can still speak to us about leadership,
Absolutely.
humility, and what it means to be faithful even in today's crazy world.
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it, how relevant these ancient texts still are.
It is.
Right from the beginning, Paul sets this really powerful tone
Okay.
by referring to himself and the other apostles as
Yeah.
servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God.
I love those phrases. They kind of jump out at you, right?
Yes.
You don't really expect that kind of language
Yeah.
when you're talking about leadership, especially in a society where,
Yeah.
leadership's often equated with power and authority.
Exactly. It's kind of turning everything on its head.
Right.
So what's he doing with that kind of imagery? I mean, what's he trying to say?
Well, it seems like he's really trying to turn those ideas of leadership upside down by calling himself a servant. Is he emphasizing the responsibility that comes with leadership? Like he's being entrusted with something really valuable.
Absolutely. It's like this idea of being given something precious to safeguard and share.
Right.
But not for his own gain, for the benefit of everyone else.
It's almost like being, given this priceless artifact, right?
Yes.
And you have to share it.
Yes.
So these mysteries of God,
Oh, yeah.
it sounds a little bit
Yeah,
mysterious.
yeah, like a secret society or something.
Yeah, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What did that actually mean back then?
Well, in the early church, these mysteries weren't about secret rituals.
Okay.
They were about these profound truths of God and his plan for salvation.
Got it.
Truths that were previously hidden but were now revealed through Jesus.
Like unlocking this hidden knowledge.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Paul, as a steward of these mysteries,
Yes.
he's entrusted with making them accessible to others.
Yes, absolutely.
He's got to share them.
And that's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
He goes on to say that it's more important to be found faithful,
Okay.
in handling these truths than to worry about impressing people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's not about outward appearances.
That's so countercultural, especially now, right?
I mean,
Like he's going against...
social media, right? Appearances are everything.
Right, exactly.
And he's saying, no, faithfulness is what matters.
Exactly. And, ultimately, God is the one who judges our hearts,
Right.
not other people.
It's almost freeing in a way. Right.
It is, yeah.
It takes the pressure off, but then that also, raises the stakes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're not living for other people's approval. You're living for
A higher standard.
a higher standard.
Exactly.
And that's where Paul's example gets really interesting,
Okay.
because he doesn't just talk about these ideals.
Right.
He lives them out, and he contrasts the Corinthians' behavior, like their pride and boastfulness, with his own experiences as an apostle.
Okay.
And he uses some pretty strong language to describe himself,
What does he say?
Like he calls himself and his companions fools for Christ.
Okay.
Weak, even, the world's dirt and scum.
Wow, that's pretty harsh, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Why would he do that? Why would he describe himself like that?
Well, to understand that,
Yeah.
we have to think about the culture in Corinth at the time.
Okay.
Corinth was obsessed with status and wealth
Got it.
and eloquence, Success was measured by outward appearances.
Yeah.
And Paul's like, no, I'm embracing the
Right.
lowest of the low.
He's turning it upside down.
Exactly.
So it's like a deliberate strategy
Yes.
to kind of expose the hollowness of worldly success, right?
Absolutely.
And highlight what really matters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True strength isn't about accolades.
Yeah.
It's about humility and willingness to suffer for Christ.
It reminds me of that verse, the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Yes, exactly.
It's like he's turning the world's value system completely on its head.
He is.
And he goes on, right? He doesn't stop there.
No, he doesn't.
He asks these really pointed questions, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you have that you did not receive?
Yes, that's a good one.
That's a powerful question.
It is, isn't it? It makes you really stop and think,
It does.
where did it all come from?
Yeah, it's a good antidote to pride.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything we have ultimately is a gift, right?
Exactly.
So, we should live with gratitude and with
Yeah.
humility.
Humility, yeah.
And then there's this really interesting tension in this chapter.
Okay.
Because Paul, he gives these really strong rebukes, But then he also calls the Corinthians his dear children.
That's true. Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah.
What does that tell us about his leadership style?
Well, I think that tension is really key to understanding Paul.
Okay.
He's not just some distant authority figure.
Got it.
He's a spiritual father who's deeply invested in their well-being.
So it's like this blend of, tough love
Yes.
and genuine affection.
Mm-hmm. He has high expectations.
Yeah.
But he also deeply cares for them.
Yeah.
It's not about power over them.
Yeah.
What about guiding their growth?
And that idea of spiritual fatherhood, that was really important in the early church, wasn't it?
Very much so.
It went beyond just, biological ties.
Absolutely.
It was this mentorship, shared faith, guidance.
Accountability.
Accountability, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's about creating a legacy of faith.
Yeah.
Passing on that wisdom.
Passing it on, yeah.
Speaking of mentorship,
yes,
Paul sends his dear and faithful son Timothy to Corinth. Why Timothy? Why not just, send another letter?
That's a good question.
What was the point of sending a person?
Yeah, I think it was a very strategic move.
Okay.
You see, the Corinthians were known for their eloquence.
Okay.
And their, love of debates.
Mm-hmm.
They needed more than just words on a page.
Right.
They needed a living example of Paul's teachings.
So Timothy wasn't just delivering a message. Yeah. He was embodying it.
Yes.
He was the message.
He was, a living embodiment.
Of humility.
Yes.
Faithfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Servant leadership.
It's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. Like Paul is saying, okay, here's the blueprint for a life of faith.
Yes.
And here's someone who's living it out.
Mm-hmm.
Learn from him, walk alongside him.
It highlights that personal connection. That's so important.
And then, that kind of leads us to this last part of the chapter where Paul addresses this, the potential need for discipline, even though he loves the Corinthians.
Yeah, it seems like a contradiction.
Yeah, and then he says that the kingdom of God is demonstrated not in idle talk, but with power. That raises so many questions.
It does.
What does he mean by power in this context? Is he talking about miracles or something else?
Well, that's a question that really gets to the heart of what it means to live out authentic faith.
Okay.
And it's something we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Have you too?
All right. See you in part 2.
Yeah, sounds good. You're right to zero in on that word power.
Yeah.
Because it's often misunderstood.
Okay.
Especially now. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we tend to equate power with dominance or control.
Right.
But Paul's talking about a completely different kind of power here.
Okay, so what kind of power is he talking about?
He's talking about the power of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
That power to change hearts and lives from the inside out.
So it's less about outward displays of authority and more about that inner strength that comes from aligning yourself with God's will.
It's that strength to overcome adversity.
Yeah.
To choose forgiveness over bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
To love even when it's hard.
Yeah, it's like that power that enabled Paul to go through all those trials, right?
Exactly.
Persecutions and imprisonment.
Yeah, not lose hope.
Right.
To keep going.
Yeah, that's pretty empowering.
It is, isn't it?
Especially when, the world feels so chaotic and unpredictable. It's like, okay, there's a source of strength that's bigger than my circumstances.
It's not dependent on your circumstances.
Right.
Exactly.
But I'm still a little unclear how this power connects with discipline.
Yeah, that's the key connection.
Okay.
You see, Paul's love for the Corinthians wasn't passive.
Right.
It wasn't just this sentimental kind of love.
Okay.
It was active.
All right.
It was fierce. It was a love that sought their good. Even if it meant confronting their sin.
Oh, I see.
Calling them to a higher standard.
It's that tough love again.
Yes, exactly.
That pushes us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't that create tension?
Of course, there's always a risk of tension when you're dealing with conflict.
Right.
But Paul believed that true unity wasn't about avoiding those conflicts.
Okay.
It was about addressing them with honesty and compassion.
Nice.
And sometimes that meant correcting behavior.
Right.
Protecting the community.
So it's about holding people accountable.
Yes.
Not to shame them.
Right.
But to help them get back on track.
Exactly. To restore them to that right relationship with God and with each other.
And that applies to all of us, right? Not just church leaders.
Absolutely. We all have a responsibility to speak truth in love.
To challenge each other when we see someone going down a wrong path.
Yeah, it's about looking out for each other.
It's like that saying, faithful are the wounds of a friend.
Yes, it's a good one.
Sometimes love means speaking hard truths.
It does. It's not always easy.
Right.
It takes courage.
Yeah.
But true love isn't always comfortable.
Right, right.
Sometimes it requires sacrifice.
So it seems like Paul's whole approach to leadership is about selfless service.
It is. It's about empowering others.
Yeah, not using your power over them.
Exactly. It's like that image of the servant of Christ that we talked about. It's not just a title.
Right.
It's a way of life.
It's a pretty radical way to think about leadership, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially in a world where everyone's trying to climb to the top.
Right. It's all about self-promotion.
Yeah, but how do we actually apply these ancient principles to our lives today?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not always easy.
Right.
Especially when we're bombarded with all these messages that contradict them.
So where do we even begin if someone wants to embrace this, servant-hearted approach?
Well, I think it starts with asking ourselves some tough questions. Like, what really motivates me?
Yeah.
Am I driven by recognition, success, control?
Right.
Or am I willing to let go of my ego and serve others?
Those are tough questions.
They are, but they're important.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a culture that's all about achievement.
Exactly.
About getting ahead.
It's all about me, me, me.
Yeah.
But Paul is calling us to something different.
So it's about shifting our focus.
Yes.
From self-promotion to serving others.
It's about making a difference.
Not just getting ahead.
Right. It's about contributing.
Yeah, but that sounds so, I don't know.
Yeah.
It
doesn't have to be, though.
Okay.
It can start small.
Like what? Give me an example.
Just listening to a friend who's struggling.
Okay.
Offering a helping hand to a neighbor. Using your talents to make your community a better place.
So it's those small acts of service.
Exactly.
Okay, that feels more manageable.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And those small acts, over time, they can make a big difference.
It's like that ripple effect.
Exactly.
So true leadership isn't about position or title.
It's about influence.
Yeah, it's about inspiring others.
Yeah, and empowering them.
And that reminds me of Paul's decision to send Timothy.
Right.
It highlights the importance of mentorship.
Yes, and accountability.
It's about having people in our lives who can challenge us.
Yeah, who can speak truth into our lives.
Even when it's hard to hear.
Exactly. We need those people.
We all need a Timothy in our lives.
We do. And we can be a Timothy for someone else, too.
This has been so insightful.
It has been, hasn't it?
I mean, it's amazing how relevant this letter still is.
It's timeless, really.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to that contrast between idle talk and power.
Yes, that's important.
There's something really profound there.
There is.
That we haven't fully unpacked yet.
Right. It goes beyond just talking versus doing.
Yeah.
It's about living out what we believe.
So let's unpack this whole idle talk versus power thing.
Yeah, it's a crucial distinction, isn't it?
It is. It feels like there's something more there than just,
Right. It's not just about talking versus doing.
Okay, so what is Paul getting at with this idle talk idea?
Well, he's not just talking about, casual conversation.
Right.
He's talking about this disconnect between words and action.
So saying one thing and doing another.
Exactly. Hypocrisy.
Yeah, the gap between our beliefs and our behavior.
And remember, the Corinthians were known for their eloquence.
Right. They loved to talk.
They did. They could weave words beautifully.
But Paul's like, hey, that's all meaningless.
Right.
If your life doesn't back it up.
Yeah, it's got to be more than just words.
It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. It's about walking the walk.
Not just talking the talk.
Right. Living out what you believe.
So what does that look like, practically?
Well, think about those times when our actions don't match our words.
Okay.
Maybe we judge others quickly. Gossip, hold grudges.
Right. We all do that sometimes.
Or maybe we hoard our resources instead of sharing them.
Or we ignore injustice happening around us.
Yeah, those are all examples of idle talk.
It's easy to fall into those traps, though, isn't it?
It is, especially in our culture.
Yeah, it's like those behaviors are almost normalized.
Right. It's a constant battle to resist that.
So how do we move from that idle talk to true power?
Well, it starts with surrendering to God.
Okay.
Letting him transform us.
From the inside out.
Exactly. And that involves prayer, reading scripture, being part of a community that challenges us.
So creating space for God to work.
Yeah, and then being willing to follow his lead.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Even when it's hard.
Yeah, that's when we start to see that real change.
That's when the fruit of the Spirit starts to grow.
Love, joy, peace, patience.
Kindness, goodness, faithfulness.
Gentleness, self-control.
That's what real power looks like.
Not the flashy stuff.
No, it's about character.
It's about those small, everyday choices.
that ripple out and impact the world.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
It has, hasn't it?
I mean, who knew that a letter written almost 2,000 years ago could still speak to us so powerfully today?
It's amazing how timeless these truths are.
So as we wrap up, what's one thing you hope our listeners take away from this?
Don't underestimate those small acts of obedience.
Okay.
It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about those daily choices to align ourselves with God's will.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Exactly. Trusting that God will work through those small steps.
That's encouraging.
It is, isn't it?
It's not about having it all figured out.
No, it's about faithfulness in the everyday.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into 1 Corinthians 4.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've been challenged and encouraged.
And inspired.
To live out these truths in your own life.
And remember, the journey continues.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions.
And keep seeking God.
Until next time, keep diving deep